ओम नमः श्री यतिराजाय विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित् सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे. So we were discussing the 41st sutra. We just completed discussing that. The sutra which said that just as a pure crystal takes the color from the object which is very near to it, so the mind, when it is cleared of all the thought waves, see, that is a precondition, that all the thought waves should be subdued, or the lake of the mind. If you can compare the mind or the chitta like a lake, the waves, if they subsist, if they are subdued, there are no waves at all. It is a calm surface of the lake. Then it achieves sameness or identity with the object of its concentration. I mean, you can see the reflection. Taking the lake as an example, the surface of the lake, if it is very calm and if it is uh, undisturbed, the surface, then there is a chance that you can uh, see the reflection of anything that is in its proximity. In fact, we see on a bright day, there is a blue sky without clouds, you will see the reflection of the blue sky on the surface of the water or a river, flowing river, provided there are not many waves. The lesser the waves, or maybe if it is a very calm pool of or a small pool which has been where the water is undisturbed, you'll see the reflection clearest of the sky. Otherwise, it will appear to be wavy and shaky. So also, now the object which is reflected, the object of its concentration, when you meditate, it depends a lot on what object you meditate. This may either be a gross object, like, or the organ of perception. Sometimes you can meditate on the organ of perception also, or the sense of ego. So whatever you meditate upon is reflected in the calm, provided the chitta or the mind stuff of the lake, of the mind stuff which can be compared to a lake, is very calm. We do not observe all these things. We cannot concentrate. We do not observe the reflection because there is so much of agitation in the mind. So many vrittis are constantly bombarding the lake that the water has been disturbed. So the water of our mind does not reflect things as it is. We see certain things which are colored by the waves of our mind. If we are in an angry mood, we see the world around us angry. If we are in a bad mood, no matter how beautiful the scenery around us, we will not be able to appreciate because the mind does not allow a pure reflection. This achievement of sameness or identity with the object of concentration, this is known as samadhi. Samadhi is a very simple thing. The more you reduce the waves of the mind, the more calm it is, the better the reflection of the objects on which you are on which you are meditating. So naturally, when you meditate on a object, whether it is a gross or a subtle or even your own ego, the self, the reflection, for the reflection to take place, the clear reflection, the proximity of the water has a tendency, just as a crystal has a tendency to reflect the color of the rose, the pink rose or the blue rose or a white rose or a yellow rose, whatever color of the rose which is there in near the crystal, it will reflect. Similarly, our mind is constantly reflecting things outside, the gross objects, the subtle objects, or the ego. So Swamiji, the Patanjali says, this achievement of sameness, even if it is a gross object, when you meditate on the gross object, of course, the result will be different. When you meditate on the organ of perception or the indriyas, the meditation, the result will be separate, will be different. If you meditate on the sense of ego, who am I? Who am I? The meditation which Raman Maharshi and others did. So that also, that reflection of that I, who am I? That who is that person within who always feels this is me, this is me, this is mine, this body belongs to me, this property belongs to me, this money belongs to me. So this I-ness, that can also be used by the yogis as an object of meditation. So when we meditate, but the condition is the condition for that thing to be called a samadhi is that the water of the chitta, the lake of the chitta, water of the lake of the chitta should be perfectly calm. There should not be a single other vritti. So the main vritti on which we are meditating, it subsumes all other vrittis, and only that color you see. So that is what 41st Sutra. So we have to understand this. The various objects of concentration that have been referred to here have been already discussed in an earlier chapter. Which object we should take. You can meditate on, say, the heart of a wonderful person. So the state of yoga, which Patanjali now calls by the name Samadhi, it is a state of yoga. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So that samadhi, that state of yoga, which is also known as samadhi, technically it is known as samadhi, but we will come to the point where there are different types of samadhi. It's not the same. So we'll see the state of yoga, which Patanjali calls as samadhi, may be achieved on each succeeding level of phenomena. That is, first we start with the gross. We may begin with outwardness of objects and penetrate towards the most inwardness of the individuality, that is the ego. So we start with a gross object, but we should not end with the gross object. So that is why when people ask, what should we meditate upon? So is not Ishta something with form? Is not the Ishta something with form? The Ishta has a form. So if the Ishta has form, then how can he be the pure consciousness? But we have to superimpose the idea of pure consciousness on that. He is not the form that we see. We begin with a form. So that is what this sutra is telling us. Whatever you begin with, the gross, it's slowly that outwardness of the objects that we see, they may be outward, they may be seen outward, the person on whom you are meditating, but slowly we have to go inside, and we have to penetrate the outer covering of that object, and that results in, it leads to the utmost inwardness of individuality. We are trying to find our own self. When we are meditating on the Lord in the heart, we are first meditating on the gross, then we go more subtle, try to find out what is that subtle reality known as our Ishta on which we are meditating, or any gross object on which we are meditating, say a symbol Om or something like that. So therefore, we can conclude that there are many kinds of samadhi, as we shall see in the subsequent sutras, that since the objects are different, the levels of meditation that we do are also different. So the identity proximity of that object with our calm mind will give us different kinds of samadhi. As I said, if the lake may be calm, the lake of the mind may be very calm, there may not be vritti, but what is reflected, what the proximity of that lake with the object meditated upon is what gives the color to that water. So if the sky is blue, the color of the water is blue. So the crystal also takes the color of an object near it. So Patanjali in this 41st Sutra gives an example that whatever if we meditate on pure consciousness, consciousness will be reflected. We won't see the external object. So that is why they say we have to imagine that the Ishta is Satchidananda, but we'll come to that. So we have to remember from this sutra that the sameness or identity with the object on which we meditate is samadhi. So samadhi is nothing but chitta vritti nirodha. Chitta vritti should be stopped. Nirodha means to stop. So stopping the chitta vritti gives the reflective powers of the lake of our mind becomes absolutely perfect, and then that chitta is able to reflect reality in a much better way. In the Upanishads, of course, we find the process, unlike yoga, the school of yoga is a different school. In Upanishads, we find this process has been described in a slightly different way, perhaps simpler manner. We are told to concentrate on the object, any object, and regard it as a symbol of the indwelling reality, the Atman. Now, this is how Upanishads ask us to meditate. The Upanishad says, take up any object. That is how the gurus taught that disciple. Said, you go and tend the cows. You will get that knowledge. Actually, you will get the knowledge from within, the pure knowledge of which you can get through samadhi. That knowledge you will get, but start serving those cows. Then the disciple comes and speaks some truth, which is a lower truth. Then the guru says, no, please continue. In fact, in one of the Upanishads, the guru is telling the disciple that I am giving you 100 cows. You tend them and take them for grazing and wait patiently till these 100 cows become 1,000 in number. So you can imagine how much of patience is required. So similarly, when we are told to meditate on any external gross object, and we have to regard it as the symbol of the indwelling reality, which is the Atman, which we don't know anything about. We know it exists. We know Brahman exists. We know the same Atman is the Brahman. We know what it is, but we cannot define or we cannot experience that pure consciousness. We experience it in a very hazy way, just as we experience the clean blue color of the sky in ripples, in a rippled surface of the water. We experience something bluish, but not the clear image of the sky. For that to happen, the river has to be very calm. So if we hold, but just as the Upanishad says, if we hold on to the concept that the symbol on which we are meditating, the gross object on which we are meditating, the Ishta on which we are meditating, or the all-pervading reality, the whole nature, whenever we go, we try to imagine it is a manifestation of the Atman which is inside, the Brahman which is inside is pervading. Sarvam khalu idam Brahma. That is one of the Mahavakyas. Sarvam khalu idam Brahma. This whatever you see, you cover with the Lord. The Lord alone exists, and these are all his reflections. So, but to hold on to this concept, that is the Upanishadic way. This is not Patanjali's way, but Upanishadic way. So that way we pass beyond the objects, the object on which we are meditating, the outer coverings of the appearance, to the inner nature of the being, to the inner nature of the being. And then we say that, oh, we have reached the essence, the kernel of what we are trying to meditate upon. We are meditating upon an external object. We go finer and finer and finer. When we penetrate, we know the real nature of everything. So by they say by just pressing one rice, you don't have to press whether the rice has cooked, the grain of rice has cooked. Just by pressing one grain of rice, and if you find that it has been cooked, then the whole, all the rice that is in the pot, you can conclude that that rice also has cooked. You don't have to press each and every grain to find out. You just take a sample, one grain. So also we should acquire that knowledge, the knowledge on the object, the reality behind the object that we meditate upon will give the reality behind all the objects in the world. So which object you take to begin with, it doesn't really matter. That is what Patanjali says. You have to go beyond the object's outer coverings of appearance to the inner nature of its being. That is what happens. So next is the sutra number 42. Smruti Parishuddhau Swarupa Shunye Evartha Matra Nirvasa Nirvitarka. That is, the meaning here is when oh no, before Nirvitarka we have the Savitarka. We finished 41. 42 is Tatra Shabdartha Jnana Vikalpaihi Sankirna Savitarka Samapattihi. That means when the mind achieves identity with a gross object of concentration, and that object has a name and form, the quality and the knowledge. It's a mixture. The awareness is a mixture of name, quality, and knowledge. This is called Savitarka Samadhi. Now, let us see how Swamiji explains it. Swamiji says this Savitarka, one has to understand this very clearly, then only we'll understand what this Nirvitarka is. So, Swamiji has translated this verse in his own inimitable style. He says, Tatra Shabdartha Jnana Vikalpaihi Sankirna Savitarka Samapatti, means sound is one thing, its meaning is the other thing. Shabdartha Jnana, Shabda, that is sound. Artha Jnana is the vibration which gives rise to meaning of that sound. Vikalpaihi, and the resulting knowledge. Sankirna, when they are all mixed up, Savitarka Samapatti. So that is known as Samadhi with question. Savitarka. Vitarka means with knowledge. It's Samadhi with questions. Tarka means actually question. So Samadhi with question. So there is some element of doubt. So it is a Samadhi with question. It is Savitarka. It is not Nirvitarka. There is still that spirit of inquiry. So sound here, Shabda means vibration. What is vibration? It is the nerve current which conduct the external sound. Say you say cow or om. There is a sound. The nerve currents take that sound to the center in the brain, and there is a reaction. So all the meditations that we do have three components. One is the sound which is uttered. You see, sound can be external or can be mental also. You can utter that sound, om or something, in the mind also. It's not necessary that the sound or shabda should be external only. It can be external, it can be internal sound. That is why when you do japa, you are told to repeat the sound, the mantra in your mind. What does it mean? You utter that sound, but it is not heard by others, nor is it heard by you, but the internal hearing is going on. Say when you say om, the mouth is uttering something, there is a reaction. Swamiji says the nerve currents take that sound through the ears to the brain. So that is the knowledge. You know what om stands for, or whatever meaning you may be knowing about it. And then there is a reaction. The brain centers give a reaction. Oh, you just now heard om. Or you say a cow. A cow. Cow means immediately the picture of the cow, the characteristics, the quality of the cow comes to your mind. And then there is a reaction from the mind. Oh, cow means this. Provided you have seen the cow, it is there stored in the memory. So these meditations are meditation with Savitarka, with question. So question means you know the knowledge, the knowledge is there. Later on, he gives us higher and higher dhyanas, Patanjali, in the next verses. But in these meditations, which are known as Savitarka Samadhi, with question, we keep the duality of the subject and the object. You know, I am here, the cow is another thing, and I am meditating on the cow. First, there is the external vibration, that is the word cow or om or something, whatever it symbolizes. The meaning is there, and then the knowledge. What is the knowledge? This is the sound is carried inward by the sense currents, and first the external vibration is there. Then it is carried inward by the sense current, and then you get the meaning. After that, there comes a reactionary wave in the chitta, in the mind, which is knowledge. The knowledge is the result. Sound, shabda and artha. You see, the shabda cannot be separated from the artha. So when you say cow in any language, it has a particular sound associated with the meaning of that word. So every word is shabdartha only. So that is why in Sanskrit is such a beautiful language that when we see objects, objects are called as padartha. Padartha means that's the same thing as shabdartha. Pada means word. So shabdartha is what we call objects. So the shabdartha of cow is a cow, that object cow. That object cow represents the word cow and the meaning that it has a particular characteristic, it gives a milk and all those things you know. Say you say water. If you say water, the word water symbolizes something, that which is fluid, that which flows. So you know the characteristics of water. It mixes with other things, it dissolves other things. So there's so many meanings associated with water. So water as a product is nothing but shabdartha or padartha. Padartha is the Sanskrit, pure Sanskrit word. Every word in Sanskrit is so precise. When they say this is a padartha, this is an object. Padartha means object in common language. So when you say this is a padartha, that means this pada, that shabda associated with that object and its meaning together make that padartha. So when you say bread, it means the word bread and the qualities and the properties associated with bread. Then the picture is reflected and then you get that knowledge of bread when you see it. So this, all the mixture of all these three makes up what we call knowledge. So when we have knowledge of bread, first there is the word bread in the mind. It may not be uttered loudly. Even if it is uttered in a very low voice or no voice at all, in the mind itself we are uttering the word, say cow, when we close our eyes and we meditate on the mantra. Similarly, we meditate on the cow, the picture of the cow comes, the properties, the characteristics, everything is clear to our consciousness. So in all the meditations up to this, we get this mixture as the object of meditation. The next samadhi is higher, which is nirvitarka. Before that, I would like to discuss that this is a fascinating subject, the sound. Why all knowledge was given through sound? Shabdartha, padartha, object. The world that we see around us is padartha, made of padarthas, different padarthas, solid, liquid, gaseous. So everything that is nothing but nama and rupa. The form has some name associated with it. Name and the form or the meaning of that form or that characteristic of the form is connected intimately with a name. So the whole universe is Nama Rupa. The whole Maya is nothing but Nama Rupa. And what is that Nama? All the Namas, all the sound symbols, possible sound symbols, all merge in the universal sound which is known as Shabda Brahma, that is Om. Om is the most perfect representation of the universal sound which a human being can utter. The human being can utter a sound starting from the throat, it comes out through the lips. The last organ, the last sense organ or the mouth is the place where you utter ma, ma. So the whole process of sound which you utter is covered from the throat to the lip. So there are different permutations and combinations of the sound like ma, pa, all these involve the movement of lips, but there are certain sounds. Doesn't utter. You don't need you can simply use the throat. So there are different three types of basic sounds, which when they are combined, the shabda comes into existence. So we get different words depending on how you pronounce. But whatever it is, all the three sounds combined together, u and ma, comprise the whole vocal capacity of the human voice. That is why this Om is considered to be so sacred. So hearing, as you know, plays a major role in our human life. All knowledge comes through hearing. This is true for us not only when we are babies and growing up, but after we learn to read, to write. You may say, when we read something, where are we uttering the sound? The baby may learn through sound repetition. We'll say this is A, this is B, this is C, and then the alphabets put together, certain words. This is cow, this is grass, GRASS. Then we teach the child alphabets, and then you may ask that when the person grows up, where is the need for sound? He can read and write, and he can think and talk. But if you see, besides hearing the external sounds, we may be hearing external sounds and words throughout the day. We are hearing external sounds. How we are manipulating this beautiful verse 42 has a deep meaning, sound meaning, and the resulting knowledge. When they get mixed up, we have Savitarka Samadhi if we do it perfectly, but we are doing it imperfectly throughout the day. There we are hearing so many external sounds and words, and we do not realize how much they manipulate our personality, how much influence words have. Now I am speaking to you, we are grasping certain ideas. It is transforming us at the same time. It is definitely transforming us. So we should not take these words. Even thinking is a sort of repeating the words in the mind. So Swamiji says, uh, uttered sound or unuttered sound which is thought, still we have the Shabda. We have to have this. So you see the impact it has. We hear a lot of sound inside our minds. You may ask, how do we hear? Oh, we think about this person. A sound is associated with this person. The actions of that person, the things that that person did to us, whatever we may be able to articulate, in our thoughts we don't articulate it, but in our minds we are uttering sounds all the same. What we read, what we hear in our minds are words, or in the electronic devices. Nowadays you have digital media where you are reading certain things. When we write, we, whether we hear it or not, in a subtle way we are uttering. When we write or read certain books, it is nothing but words. So assume that if somebody had read them to you, you would have heard it. But even if they don't read, the mind hears it. So sound cannot be removed from our life. Our life is nothing but sound, nama, rupa, shabda, artha, shabdartha, padartha. So the meaning of the sound and the reaction of our mind, of the chitta to that sound, these three gets mixed up, and that is the whole of creation. So if you call somebody a fool, there is a reaction in his mind. He gets angry, or if he is dull, he will not mind being called a fool. But still, the Shabda has certain artha, it has a meaning. Every word has a meaning. So we are manipulating sounds, willingly or unwillingly, we are manipulating sounds. Even if we don't talk to somebody, we are hearing ourselves. And we are reading our thoughts, we are hearing our thoughts, mentally hearing our thoughts. And as if these thoughts are constantly being repeated, we are thinking loudly, as it were. We are thinking loudly, that means it is nothing but we are reproducing the words in our mind, no matter how much or with what speed. Some people, in some people's mind, it goes on very rapidly. So there is no end to this sound. That is what Patanjali wants to say. To free ourselves from it is what yoga aims at. Yoga says, just for a moment, try to get rid of all the sounds. But even if we don't hear the sounds, don't think that You may go to a, that's why when people go to a very calm solitude or a quiet place, they for a moment they feel a lot of joy, but they can't stay there. Why? They go to a very remote place or maybe in a cave, and it is a novelty. When you go to a very calm place, you get a joy. You can't explain what joy that is, but it doesn't last long. Not because the sound comes, the mental sound you are thinking, you have not been able to stop. So no matter if, even if you stop the entire external sound, go into a soundless place, still the sound is reproduced by your own mind. So there is no end to this hearing. To free ourselves from it, we may have this nowadays, you have this noise cancelling uh, earphones. Some people, they find the noise outside so difficult. So nowadays there is so much advanced technology that you have this noise cancelling earphones. So you just want to cut off the external sound. You just want to focus on something that you are hearing, some song that you are hearing. So as a result, we use all sorts of devices. But how long can you use it? You can stop the external sound, but you can't stop the internal thoughts. A person who is listening, even when you are listening to some music, you are not focusing only on that music. There are other thoughts. Absent mindedly, you are thinking other things. Oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. And you are doing multitasking. Your mind is constantly producing chatter. Chatter is not necessarily a loud sound, it can be very quiet sound. So these devices may help you to cut off the external sounds. Going to solitude may help you to cut off the external sounds, but they will not stop the sounds altogether. So then we have uh, even in sleep. For example, we think that in sleep, okay, our senses are at rest, there is no sound, what will happen? But unfortunately, the hearing continues even when we try to sleep, because there is that dream state. The only time we get rid of the sound in our shabda in our consciousness, is when we go into deep sleep. That is why it is so refreshing. A little amount of deep sleep gives us so much of relaxation. So when we are in deep sleep, in sushupti, where no words are spoken, no thoughts are thought. See this, it's not that there, when you are in deep sleep, others may speak thoughts, but they are not registered in your ear. And the main thing is the internal sound is also stopped, which is very important in meditation. The solitude that we seek is not just external. No amount of external reducing of external sound or making the external sound totally quiet will help, because the internal sounds become we start coming. So thoughts are thought in our mind, and but in that deep sleep, even the thoughts stop for a time being. But it is not voluntary, it automatically happens. You are so tired of thinking that the mind rebels. It says, no, I want some quiet time now, really. And then by force of habit, you just go into deep sleep. So you become so tired with the noise and sound, your own sound, you're constantly thinking so many thoughts, that the mind, unless it gets some deep sleep, it can't be refreshed, because that is the only time when you are in deep, some state which is very near to samadhi, the samadhi where there are no thoughts. It's not savitarka, it is known as nirvitarka. We'll come to that sutra now. 43rd tells us, Mruti parishuddho swarupa shunne evartha matra nirbhasa nirvitarka. So savitarka samadhi is where you are thinking the thoughts, but one thought, and the meaning and the knowledge and the vibration of the sound all get mixed up. You can't distinguish. So you are just meditating on the mantra, say. The mantra is getting repeated again and again and again and again. So all the knowledge of the Ishta, the knowledge of the mantra, the sound and everything is getting mixed up, as it were. So the resultant is what is known as savitarka. So the repetition of the mantra in many cases subsumes or cancels all the other sounds. That is why japa gives us so much of joy. If one is able to constantly, Holy Mother used to say, Japat Siddhi. What does she mean? We get Savitarka Samadhi by constantly repeating, whether we know the meaning or not. Some meaning we know. So it's better to know the meaning of the mantra and not just mechanically repeat it. It is like repeating a word. Somebody tells us, this is, you just repeat cow, but you don't know the meaning of the word cow. You go on repeating cow, cow, cow. It doesn't make any sense. You don't think of the qualities of the cow. So the knowledge has to be complete of that sound. So the mantra, what it means, what it stands for, at least. We don't have to know the word by word meaning, but the whole phrase or the whole mantra means something. That is what we should focus on. And that is Savitarka Samadhi, because that mantra subsumes the other thoughts or prevents it from coming. So at least when you are doing that mantra, you don't allow other thoughts to come, if you are able to do it. It's not that people don't think other thoughts when they are doing mantra, when they are doing japa. You may be doing, there are so many people counting their beats and at the same time doing business, doing something. There are so many people, they're even talking to other people. That is not what Savitarka Samadhi. Savitarka Samadhi means you have a process where the the inward sound which is going inward in our consciousness, the reactionary wave, and the knowledge which is the result as the reaction from the mind, from the brain or the chitta, the mixture is Savitarka knowledge. It's a knowledge of the sound that you are producing, but it is only one. It cannot be many. If there are many objects, then you are not samadhi. You have to hold on to one object to the exclusion of everything else. So now the problem is these sounds which we utter, including the sound of the mantra, the good sounds that we hear throughout the day, the bad sounds that disturb us and cause problems in our consciousness. The problem is not that hearing is not the problem, hearing these sounds. That is why Swamiji says, even if you are in the midst of a very, very busy market, your mind can be still be calm. If you have that power of yoga, the power of concentration, in the beginning, of course, solitude may help you to reduce the number of sounds, but ultimately you have to go to a state where sound is not a problem. How you control that sound, which sounds do you allow to disturb you and impinge upon the consciousness and agitate the waters of the mind. The water of the mind, if it is agitated too much, if we allow the emotions, the thoughts combined with emotions, thinking, feeling, and willing, if all the three combine, then there is a big splash. If it is just a thought, it is harmless. If that thought is connected, intensity is increased further by our attaching some emotion to it. So you think of a cow, but if you have been deeply attached to that cow, then you go towards that cow and try to fondle it, then it becomes a samskara. Then the wave is very deep. But if you just observe that cow as if you are observing a painting, that is why we speak so much of detachment. Why do we speak of detachment while doing work, while interacting, while listening to sounds, while speaking? That detached feeling, if you don't attach any emotions, the force of attraction or repulsion, there is raga or there is dvesha. Raga means attraction towards certain sounds. And the moment somebody says something bad, you have a repulsion for that. So this raga and dvesha are the two emotions which give power to our thoughts, and then the disturbance starts. Then the chain reaction starts, and our whole personality undergoes a change. So the ability to hear is not a very big issue. It's not a problem. That is why just going into solitude will not help. Even if you hear sounds, it doesn't matter if you know how to control it. But when we become passive actors in an uncontrolled way, we become passive actors to whatever is being done. And the sound and the noise and go on making us dance to their tune. And we just go on reacting to everything that is told to us, everything that we hear, and then we get disturbed unnecessarily. Maybe the words are harmless, by themselves they are harmless. If you don't react, if you don't mix your reaction to that, the reactive mind, if it is not active, if it is calmed down, then the words have no impact on your mind. It so already the sound, there are so many sounds that are being bombarded. We have the social media, we have thoughts, we have WhatsApp, we have music which we are hearing. We are hearing abuses from our colleagues, maybe, or maybe from within the family. We are hearing good sounds, we are hearing bad sounds. So there is already a chaos in our life. The to reclaim or to have some kind of control by manipulating how the sound affects us, not just the doors or closing the doors. You may cut off the sound, yeah, that may solve temporarily, but then your own sound starts. You cut off yourself from the whole society, but the memory of your the words that you heard throughout the day, they haunt you, and even in your closet they will come and disturb you. You will think of, you will be surprised to know that the thoughts which you have heard long ago, somebody has spoken something, you go on your mind goes on agitating on what he or she spoke, and then you disturb yourself. So indirectly you are reproducing those sounds. So we want to, our whole yoga is to minimize the unwanted sounds, the control of the sounds, voices, the sounds, the shabdartha that we hear, and the sound, the meaning, and the resulting knowledge, which results. That Savitarka Samadhi, Patanjali begins with a very gross level of Samadhi, which is known as Savitarka Samadhi, where before we understand what Nirvitarka Samadhi is, the Savitarka Samadhi is holding on to an object like your Ishta, the Japa, and as far as possible throughout the day, when you reach a stage where no other sound disturbs you except this sound, then it is known as Savitarka Samadhi. And he says it is a lower Samadhi. We'll come to what a higher Samadhi is. So when we think, when we read, when we write, when we do art, actually we are living in an uncontrolled way. All deep thinking that we do is nothing but a deep conversation which we have with ourselves. As we organize all the ideas, thoughts, we think, oh, we are not talking to anybody. But are we really calm? Are we really without noise? The noise of our own noise, our own thoughts, our own interpretations or misinterpretations. They are not necessarily interpretations, they can be misinterpretation. So our own misinterpretation, our own conversations which is going on within us, these actually create a deep impact on our personality, either for the good or for the bad. If you have been hearing good words, that is why they say always try to hear good thoughts. Swamiji says, you are what you think. So not only you are not what you think, but you are also what you hear. So what you hear, what you think, that is nothing but hearing in a different form, hearing some voice within in a different form. So all these things impact our lives and create the personality that we are. So if we have a tendency to get irritated at every little thought, at every little voice that is spoken, every word that others speak, whatever may be their intention. Sometimes their intentions may be to just make some fun, but we get agitated. It's a fact. We don't take things in a detached way. If we had been able to do that, if we had been able to control the voices outside, We can't possibly stop the voices outside, just as we can't stop the voices inside. We can't stop our thoughts. The sounds which have died long ago, somebody has spoken something, and you keep on ruminating on it, keep on thinking about it. And then you create a problem for yourself and for others. So that is how uh, focused hearing. If we are in control of our thoughts, if we are in control of what we think, then you have to remember that focused hearing can be acquired by constant practice. So what is satsanga? What does reading good books or listening to good talks or simply repeating the mantra, all these things are designed to lessen the noise in our life. So the more lessen or at least counteract the negative noises by the positive noises. And when we focus on one particular sound, it becomes Savitarka Samadhi. So in other words, this lower Samadhi, though it is called lower Samadhi, it's a very difficult thing to attain. When Holy Mother says Japat Siddhi, to do japa throughout the day itself is such a difficult task. It's not so easy as it appears. So Japat Siddhi can mean that the overwhelming sound of the japa, you manipulate in such a way, you control your sounds that are impacting your life in such a way that the overwhelming sound of the japa subsumes the lower disturbing sounds. So you suddenly hear certain things and you don't know how to control it. It leads to chain reactions. So many sounds you create within. The external sound was just a simple sound. And if you don't know the meaning, as they say, ignorance is bliss, it is fine. Swamiji used to tell a joke that there was a very fat man and somebody else came and told him, you hippopotamus is a huge animal. So he called him a hippo, but fortunately for him, he did not know the meaning of the word hippopotamus. So when he called him a hippo, he just smiled because there was no reaction. But that was because he was ignorant, not that he was detached. Otherwise, if he had then, after a while, he just thought, let me see what is the meaning of this Shabdartha. In the sutra, Shabdartha, what word and its meaning does to us, how we are manipulating voices, sounds, internal sounds, external sounds all the time. So this person goes and reads the dictionary and sees what hippo means. And then he sees the picture of that animal, that fat animal. Then he understands, oh, this person wanted to call me fat. Then he goes, he gets terribly angry. So the reaction was only when he knew the meaning, when he knew the Shabdartha. So that is why either you don't know the artha of the Shabda, then you are quiet in a way, but that is not a positive way. But knowing the meaning of the word, you just keep quiet. Don't get attached to that word. So that is controlling the Shabda in our lives. The small Shabdas, the small thoughts, the small spoken word, which we are constantly bombarded with. You see our whole life, it's a constant bombarding of sounds uttered, sounds not uttered. Even the thoughts, the sound that, so sound plays such an important part. Voice or hearing is such an important, that is why all knowledge, good knowledge is known as Shruti. So you should go to Shruti. When they say Shruti means the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, not the Bhagavad Gita, that is Smriti. That is repeated articulated in a different way based on the Shruti is Smriti. So even Smriti is good if it is a good Smriti. But Shruti means that which is heard, the sacred words that convey the essence of the existence, the reality. So that is Shruti. So that Shruti, that sacred sound is what we have to learn how to manipulate. And when we think of only one sound to the extent of all others, when the meditation becomes so deep that you think of only one sound to the exclusion of others, then we have this Savitarka Samadhi. So we shall conclude today, and if there are some questions, I will answer. This is what this Sutra 42 number Sutra says. So let me see. Yeah, the sound Om can be meditated on, but what form or shape is associated with that Brahma? Is it called Anahata sound? Yes, Om is an uttered sound. So it is not the Anahata sound. Anahata means that which is not struck. The sound Om is the representative sound of the universal sound, that is why it is known as Shabda Brahman. So when you say Om, when it spontaneously arises from the depth of your consciousness without uttering it, now we have to physically utter it. We have to repeat Om, Om. So it is a physical utterance. Even when you utter it in the mind, the mantra, it is a mental utterance of the external sound. There is some sound symbol, Om Namah Shivaya, or some mantra, Namah Shivaya. All these things are external sounds. They represent certain deities or they represent God. So when we meditate on that constantly to the exclusion of other things, even including Om, so there is no need for it to have a form or shape. Shabda and Artha. It can have a form, like a cow has a form. Gross objects have a form. But the Anahata sound doesn't have a form. It is pure sound. So the universe, as the Bible says famously, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word itself was God. In the beginning was the Word. The sound is the beginning of creation, Shabda Brahma. When the world is created, it is made of Nama, Shabda and Artha. Artha means the meaning. So Rupa doesn't mean an external form. It can also mean the meaning of that sound. So that is what it is known as. Anahata sound is definitely unheard sound where there is no vibration. The Ahata sound, that is actually the sound Om that we utter. So we have to trace that Om, and when we go back, when we try to find out go inward and find out from where the source of that Om sound is. That is what is Anahata. Anahata Dhvani, it is known as. It is a sound which is unheard. It's a spontaneous sound of the cosmic motor, as it is said. The cosmic rhythm, or the whole creation has a universal sound. You see, as if you see the editorial of this May-June issue, where I have mentioned this fact that the cosmic motor is as it were running, giving rise, the Anahata sound gives rise to various Ahata sounds beginning with Om. Then the other sounds come, and then the creation takes place. So the creation is nothing but name and form for in our consciousness. When we go back to that, Ahata sound becomes Anahata, and the universal music, the cosmic music, from which the whole universe, the whole creation has sprung up, that sound is the Anahata sound. But when it creates planets, create all this whole existence, creates the Padarthas, creates the Shabdarthas, as it is mentioned in the sutra. When it is created, you find the sound is polluting in nature. It has already become gross. It has become Ahata sound. It is not an Ahata means struck sound. Whenever the lips strike, whenever the throat gives out certain sound, you say the cow, the word comes out, it is a Ahata sound. So the Ahata has come from the internal sound, which is anahata, which is unspoken, unheard, and that sound can be heard only when you realize that Shabda, that Brahman, in that pure consciousness within you. So that the whole object of Mantra Shastra is to subdue the external sound. Now there is too much of noise outside, too much of sounds bombarding us. We have to quieten those sounds. When it has been reduced to a certain extent, then it becomes pratyahara. Then it comes to dharana. Pratyahara means stopping the mind from going more and more gross, running after things, running after people, running after so many things. That makes you going towards the ahara. Pratyahara means against that outward flow. So once we start going in, then we come to dharana. That is the next stage. Then we go to dhyana. Then we go to samadhi. Now, samadhi is a far off cry for us because we first have to get rid of the external sounds, the sounds that are impacting our lives in a negative way. Then we go to the internal sounds, the good sounds which can subdue the external sounds. That is what the purpose of all these prayers, the internal prayers that we do. Prayers are also, they comprise of various words trying to reduce the internal sound. The external sound may be when you repeat the mantra loudly, it is external sound, but there is the mantra when you repeat it internally, it stops the internal sound, which is very important because you may forcibly stop the external sound, but what about the internal thoughts, the internal disturbing sounds which are creating havoc in us, creating so much of reaction? So to stop that turmoil and focus on only one sound, and the object and the meaning of that sound is known as Savitarka Samadhi. So the next question is, during the morning meditation, the mind is calmer, but in the evening, thoughts from all our activities during the day are in the mind. So how to calm the mind before evening meditation? So this is an entire technique. There are so many things, preconditions, how you behave throughout the day. It's not that everybody's mind is disturbed in the evening. If he has seen to it that no matter how many thoughts come from different activities, the essence of everything is given in the Gita is detachment. So sounds by themselves are not harmful. How much you attach yourself to that sound and how you get tossed up or tossed between happiness and sorrow throughout the day, that is more important. The sounds by themselves are not harmful. So it is not always necessary that mind is calm in the morning. If you have a very bad dream, there are so many thoughts, sounds coming in your own mind when you are dreaming. If you have a disturbed sleep, then even the morning mind may not be calm. So you can't conclude that the morning meditation is always better. Sometimes it can be bad depending on how you have slept. And sometimes the evening may be nice. If you have done all your duties in a very detached manner, everything has gone smoothly, then you go home, then you find the evening meditation, mind becomes calm. Actually, they say the Sandhi period is the best. When night turns into dawn, that is the first Sandhi period. Then we have the noon where the rising sun then slowly sets. And then we have the evening where the sun totally sets and then night starts. And then we have midnight. So there are 4 praharas. So they say meditating on these transitory phases, because the sound, it has a tendency to be less noisy, not only physically, but mentally. The mind also comes, yogis have observed that during the Sandhi period, the mind becomes calm. So for many people, evening meditation is more preferable. For some people, midnight meditation is good. For some people, early morning meditation is good. So it depends on your biological rhythm and biological cycle. It's not necessary that maybe in your case, in the evening, if you have a very hectic life, may be very disturbing. But still, you can calm the mind by detaching. The only way is abhyasa and vairagya, practicing repetition of one particular holy name, and one because even in that, if you have diversity, people run after so many deities. Some people ask me different deities. Somebody asked me from the Bhagavad Gita that worshipping lower deities, you go, what do you mean by lower deities? When you worship somebody as Krishna or Ramakrishna or any as Ishta, whoever that Ishta is, all other things, all other gods and goddesses other than the Ishta become deities, become, you may treat them, we have a tendency to treat them as deities. Lakshmi will give you wealth, somebody will give you something else, Saraswati will give you knowledge. So these are, we are using it, downgrading it to a deity. So then we have Varuna, then we have Shani. Now there are so many planets which people worship. There is Rahu, Ketu. If you go to an astrologer, he'll give so many deities. Then we have Hanuman. This in our mythology is full of deities. So Krishna, he didn't say that you worship me as such. When he said he worship Brahman. So if your Ishta is Brahman, if you superimpose Satchidananda on your Ishta, then he becomes the presiding deity. So there is no contradictory at all. Worshipping the smaller deities means worshipping the deities as someone who gives you some gross benefit is a deity. So Lakshmi can be your Ishta. If Lakshmi is your Ishta, or say Saraswati is your Ishta, then she becomes the symbol of Brahman, the symbol of the Supreme. But if you consider Lakshmi as somebody who gives you material wealth, Saraswati who gives you secular knowledge, then you are downgrading that deity. So it's in your own mind. The deities by themselves, any object, that's why Patanjali does not focus on any particular god or goddess. There's nothing absolute. Whether you meditate on Krishna, or whether you meditate on Rama, or whether you even meditate on Hanuman or any god or goddess, considering him as the supreme Satchidananda Brahman, that meditation will become fruitful. So it's not a question of belief, whether one goddess is superior to the other, whether you worship her as Durga, whether you worship her as Saraswati, any goddess, but is she your Ishta? That is why in our tradition we give Ishta mantra. When you give Ishta mantra, that god, it's that god and the mantra associated with that deity or that object. It sometimes need not be a form. It can be just a symbol. If you are repeating Om, it can just be the symbol Om. So you are meditating on that as the Supreme Brahman. But if you have some Ishta, some form of God, whether mythological or real, you can take that form and meditate on him. So it's not a question of which God is superior or inferior. That is creating so much of problems. So we have to understand this fact very clearly, that the Shabda Artha, whatever be the Shabda, the Artha, that meaning which we give to that Shabda, that symbol, that mantra or that Ishta on whom we are meditating, has to be the Supreme Brahman, the Satchidananda, as I explained. If you have that concept, then no matter which god or goddess you worship, you will lead your mind, or you will be able to first go to Savitarka Samadhi and the next higher Samadhi, which is Nirvitarka, which we'll discuss in the next class. Do the three gunas pervade the world of sound? Yeah, everything is a result of gunas only. So the different sounds, in particular music, you have negative sounds, you have positive sounds, depending on the gunas, depending on the feeling that it arouses. That is why Swamiji said that music which arouses the higher feelings alone should be cultivated. Even in the case of writing, he said any author, don't read any books. Read only books which arouse the higher noble thoughts. So sound has such a wonderful impact. Whether it is music, it has to be an elevating music, a noble music. So there are certain sounds which raise the consciousness, and there are certain sounds which make the consciousness droop down, make it go towards the gross. Then there are lyrics accompanying, that's not just the music, there are lyrics which are used in the music. They are also very important. So it's not just any fiction or any book that is written can change your life. It is the quality. Swamiji says very clearly, the hallmark of good literature is, when he spoke about the words spoken by his master, he says every word that came out of his mouth represented something very noble, very high. So the hallmark of a good literature is, what kind of emotions does it make you depressive? If there is a something which makes your mind even more depressed, then what's the use of reading certain things, negative things? So that is why all the gunas, tamas will drag it down, tamasic music, rajasic, sattvic, or a mixture of all these things definitely impact music, impact our thoughts, impact the sounds that we hear. Now the last question I will answer. So there are many questions. Does the sound of silence really exist? Without being poetic or something on a practical experience, many people enjoy rising very early in the morning before the world wakes up to feel and experience the silence. Yes, the sound of silence is the sound where you're not cluttered with many thoughts. That is the sound of silence. So maybe there is a siren. When Swami Vivekananda was meditating in Dakshineshwar, sometimes early in the morning and late in the evening, there was a factory nearby. So they used to call their employees, they used to sound that siren. It was a very big sound. And Swamiji used to get irritated with that sound. So, and then he complained to Thakur, I was getting a very good meditation. Suddenly the siren from nowhere started shouting. So Swamiji, Thakur gave a wonderful advice. He said, why don't you focus on that siren itself to the exclusion of all other noises? The idea is to stop the clutter. So there's no question of being poetic. The sound of silence is definitely there. But here you are sounding very poetic. The sound of silence. Yes, if you can meditate on what this really means. The sound of silence is nothing but the sound, the anahata dhvani, which is a result of calming down of the thoughts. So when thoughts do not arise, when your mind has reached through pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, constant practice, you reach a state where undisturbing thoughts don't rise in your mind, then you enjoy a strange kind of sound, which is, it's not a poetic expression, but sound of silence is something which is very tangible. But we rarely get glimpse of that. One has to be really contemplative, meditative, and the practical experience, it is very difficult to describe unless you have that experience yourself, oneself. We can't explain what is the sound of silence, but it is definitely a fact. So many people, as you said, enjoy rising very early in the morning before.
Bone end.
Just a minute, I'll have to. So the next question is, one minute, there's some sound coming. I'll have to mute some sounds. Yeah. So now that I'll come to the questions. Somebody had unmuted themselves anyway. So many people, when they rise very early in the morning before the world wakes up, whether the world wakes up, some part of the world, people have already woken up. So that really doesn't matter. The thought waves are always there. But how much of receptivity you have, how much of voice control or sound control or word control one has acquired in one's own life. That is important. So if you are really progressing in your meditation and you have that habit of rising very early in the morning and you experience that silence, then that is the best time to meditate. It can be any time. Some people have their biological clocks in such a way that at deep when it is midnight, they go into that kind of silence. So silence can be found anywhere, even when you are traveling somewhere or in a tube or in a natural surrounding. Whenever the sound of silence or maybe your thoughts get reduced drastically, then is the right time to enjoy that silence, the sound of silence. So it really exists and it has to be experienced. The more you experience it, the more you focus on meditation, the more you focus on japa, this sound can be experienced. The other question is why we fall asleep when there is complete silence. Why is it so hard to stay awake in silence? Easier to sleep. It is not necessary. Sleep is something, if you are deprived of sleep for a long time, if sleeplessness, the body has certain requirements. It's not just a mental state. The mind also gets tired because of constant bombarding of voices and sounds and thoughts. So if a person has been living a very subdued life, not allowing the thoughts, a detached life, the more detachment there is, the less there is chance that the sound will disturb us. So when there is complete silence, actually the memory of sleep, when there was total silence, comes back. So you have a tendency to go to sleep. But the yogis, that's why they say what is night to the ordinary person, to a bhogi, is day to a yogi, and what is day to a bhogi is night to a yogi. The what it really means in the Bhagavad Gita, this particular verse, it means that it depends on our attitude, whether there is total silence or not. If we are really tired, if the personality is totally exhausted, then it will spontaneously go to sleep. And if that doesn't happen, then we have to take some tranquilizers and force the mind, because sleep is something which is a bodily necessity. So a minimum hours of sleep, if they are there, then it is not necessary. Sometimes when there are people talking all around, but you are so exhausted that you just collapse in the bed. So it's not necessary that one falls asleep when there is complete silence. It is definitely sometimes hard to stay awake in silence, because during that silence you are reminded of uh, that sleeping state, the state of deep sleep, where there was complete silence, and that induces sleep because you have lack of sleep. If there is enough sleep, if one has slept well, then this silence can be appreciated, can be used to meditate and raise oneself to higher consciousness. So do you mean to say that a tired person cannot meditate? It is not necessary. Tiredness, if it is physical, then perhaps he cannot. So a tired person can lie down and meditate. That is what many of Latu Maharaj also used to do. So a person may be tired to sit, but he may not be tired to just lie down. If he is very tired, both physically and mentally, then it's better to go to sleep, and then when you get up, you can meditate. But tired person can meditate, definitely. If he is physically tired, then mentally he is okay. Then he can just lie down or relax somewhere, sit in a very calm position, and then go on meditating. But if the mind also, uh, yeah, there is a chance that one sleeps, because naturally we sleep when we lie down. So meditation in a lying down position is not suggested, but sometimes when the body, the back and all is really giving trouble, when you can't sit. If one can sit, even using some kind of wall support or some kind of support to the spine, then it is always better to sit in a corner supported by the wall or something, so that the body, even though the weak body, and just sit and then there are less chances of sleeping. Naturally, when you lie down, there is a tendency, the mind becomes used to sleep, because we always sleep in a lying down position. Unless the horses can sleep when they are standing. I was surprised to know that in the stable, if you see, the horses stand and sleep, they can sleep. Some animals sleep on the branch of the tree while they are standing. Everybody does not lie down, but human beings have a tendency. So we have made ourselves, created a habit that the moment you lie down, you fall asleep. That's why they say don't read books, read some holy book when you are lying down, because then you will slowly, the book will collapse and you will just go to deep sleep. But when you are tired, of course, it is better to sleep and then get up early and then sit for meditation. So I'll take leave now. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.